I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. We have a great episode for you today. Now, I don't know if it's just me, maybe because I'm a journalist and I host this podcast and I run Juno News. It seems like everyone I talk to, every conversation, every time I go out for lunch with friends or meet up with someone, talk to someone, even catching up online, the issue comes forward that Canada's broken, that there is serious problems in our country. They're wide ranging. We discuss so many of the topics here on the show. But to me, it all comes back to immigration. Canada's immigration system has been destroyed. It has been decimated by the Trudeau Liberals. And it seems to me that the Carney government is just continuing down the same path. They have no real plan to fix things. And so, from my perspective, the thing that the conservatives need to do is craft a strong message on immigration, craft a better message, put forth a better position to change, have more distance between them and the liberals. And it's just so easy, right? All it takes is just say, let's go back to how things were before Justin Trudeau became prime minister and flung the doors wide open. Well, we didn't see enough on that front from Pierre Poilievre, the conservative leader, during the recent federal election. But there have been some good signs, folks. There have been some positive signs that he is willing to take on this thorny issue, that he wants changes, that he sees the same problems that you and I see, that so many of the problems in our country come back to this broken immigration system. So I want to walk you through what has happened. So back in June, on June 10th, Pierre Poilievre was asked specifically his take on Bill C2. That is the Mark Carney government's bill to crack down on fentanyl and drug smuggling. And there's a couple provisions in there to crack down on fake asylum seekers, people who come to the country, they overstay their visa, and then rather than going home, rather than leaving the country when they should, they just throw up their hands and say, actually, I'm a refugee. They put in an asylum claim. So Mark Carney is taking a few steps to address this very small area of our immigration law. Pierre Poilievre was asked about that policy, about Bill C2, and I'm going to show you what he said because it was actually quite good. I think that he took a step further than we'd heard him take during the federal election. And he basically said, look, Canada needs severe limits on our population growth. 100% we do. So let's play that clip.
We support a stronger border. We want severe limits on population growth to reverse the damage the Liberals did to our system. The population has been growing out of control. Our borders have been left wide open. This has caused the free flow of drugs.
So so Pierre Poilievre does correctly diagnose the problem that with severe open borders, we've seen severe population growth, not intentional, not the native-born population growing the population as you should through people having children and growing the population naturally, but by importing people from all over the world, including people, frankly, who have no business being in Canada, people who are not enriching our country or making it better. And so, what happened when Pierre Poilievre made that comment? Well, the legacy media, the Laurentian elites, absolutely lost their minds, right? They flipped out. Here is the headline from Global News. Poilievre calls for severe limits on population growth. Everybody's favorite grumpy Laurentian elite, Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail and of the CBC, writes this on X. He goes, he's panicking. This is awful. uh, okay, Andrew Coyne, can you tell me exactly what is awful about a conservative leader saying, hey, population growth is out of control because the Trudeau Liberals have absolutely no controls on our immigration system. And so, yeah, we need to get that out of control. I don't think Pierre Poilievre is panicking. And no, I don't think it's awful. I think that he's actually finally hitting the nail on the head and talking about the real problem in the country, and the source of that real problem wasn't just Andrew Coyne. Here we have David Gordon Cook, who is the head of the New Brunswick Media Co-op, social justice reporter here, saying this is just pathetic race baiting. It's race baiting now to notice that our immigration system is broken. So just noticing that the Trudeau government took a fairly functioning immigration system where we let in about 250,000 people a year to flinging open the doors wide open, letting in somewhere between 2 and 3 million people a year. Just noticing that apparently is pathetic race baiting. Finally, we have the former Liberal immigration minister, Justin Trudeau's immigration minister, one of the people who is actually at fault here. This is what he wrote on X. He says, Poilievre is flailing after his call for severe limits on Canada's immigration. And yes, there is a clip that goes along with that. So let's play that clip.
Yesterday, Mr. Poilievre said there should be severe limits on immigration increases, seemingly referencing the immigration targets he put in place. What do you make of him saying?
As usual, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. It looks like he's flailing.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, anybody who has eyes and has access to the internet has probably seen some of the videos that circulate online showing some of the cultural problems that happen from open mass immigration. And look, we can look up the numbers, right? We can check out Stats Canada, we can check out the immigration website to see that, yes, the Liberal government has let in tremendous amounts of people from the developing world, and it is growing much, much faster than it had previously. We'll get to all those numbers in just a few minutes, but I wanted to, that's all leading us up to what happened this week. So after that comment from Pierre Poilievre in Ottawa, he's been in Alberta, he's been at the Calgary Stampede, he's been campaigning in the by-election. Well, he was back in Ottawa, and I believe this is the first time he was in front of the Ottawa press gallery, having a press conference since that initial event. And so, you know, the Ottawa journalists, they all hate conservatives, they all hate Pierre Poilievre, and they're all just waiting for their turn to try to give a gotcha question, a gotcha moment. And so we had that yesterday. Paul Dutch from Global News made the comment saying, you know, you previously said that you wanted severe limits on population growth in Canada. Can you go ahead and clarify what you mean by that? And here is how Pierre Poilievre responded.
To fix the problem, we've got to we need to put very hard caps on immigration levels. We need more people leaving than coming for the next couple of years. And we need, so our country can actually catch up. Our immigration policy should invite the right people in the right numbers in a way that puts Canada and Canadians first.
100%. So Pierre Poilievre has doubled down. He has ignored what the legacy media have said. He's ignored what the fancy people, what the Andrew Coyne types have said, all the pearl clutching, like, oh my goodness, you can't talk about immigration. How dare you even mention that we lower the population rather than constantly grow the population through immigration? And Pierre Poilievre is doing the right thing. He is doubling down and saying, no, I didn't just misspeak last time when I had that press conference. I was being deliberate. This is a deliberate shift in policy for the Conservatives. They are saying enough is enough. We cannot have mass immigration when we're dealing with all of the problems that we are dealing with today. All right, folks, to help me dive into this a little deeper, I'm pleased to be joined by Wyatt Claypool. He is a political commentator, founder of the National Telegraph. Wyatt, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we have some exciting news as well. Wyatt will be joining Juno News as a contributor, as a show host, starting later this week. I believe you're filming your first episode with us at some point this week. So, Wyatt, we're very excited to have you joining the network.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun or could be a complete disaster, but that's on you for making the decision.
Right on. Okay, well, what do you make of Pierre Poilievre and this apparent shift, I think, in the right direction, doubling down on his comments and saying, no, we do need to severely limit immigration in Canada? What do you think?
Well, it's not just Pierre Poilievre rejecting the sort of conventional wisdom of Andrew Coyne types and the rest of the legacy media and the political establishment. It's also him apparently rejecting I guess, the opinions of his advisors during the election because he ran on a cap of 200,000, 250,000 new permanent residents to match the number of new houses being built per year, but that didn't even exactly limit new temporary foreign workers or foreign students. So this is a big shift, and I think it's actually a very big win for the independent media and online commentators because don't think you could find any conservative commentator or independent media outlet who liked the more mild reductions that he was pitching during the election. It was better than what the liberals were doing, so naturally it was still way more. It was preferable, but this is genuinely probably what we were all asking for. People must leave if their visas are expired, and who cares if the population goes down if people currently can't even afford homes?
Well, it's kind of funny because during the election, there was sort of a lot of noise in the independent space about how Mark Wiseman, the head of the Century Initiative, had joined Mark Carney's campaign. And of course, the Century Initiative is this sort of like liberal think tank that they want to deliberately increase our country's population to 100 million by the end of the century, which is just so shockingly, it's such a shocking change, right? Like, 100 million, it won't be Canada anymore, right? It will just be a hodgepodge of all these other people who have not assimilated into Canada, right? Like when I was growing up, Canada's population was 30 million. Now it's 40 million, right? We've boosted that population by 10 million in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And is the country any better for it? I don't know. But I would argue the country is a lot worse than it was 15, 20 years ago. But the idea was that the media and the Liberal Party, they didn't want anything to do with that association. They distanced themselves from it. In fact, legacy media said that it was propagandistic and fake news to say that the Liberals wanted that 100 million population. And yet when Pierre Poilievre just says the exact opposite, that no, we need to decrease our population, again, pearl clutching. So it kind of proves the theory that no, they do want, like the goal here is to drastically increase Canada's population. They want that. I mean, maybe it won't be 100 million, but they want a bigger population. They want to artificially boost our population. And I just want to show viewers exactly what we're talking about, because the Fraser Institute earlier this summer had a report just outlining what we're talking about. So the headline was the average annual immigration was 617,000 on average from 2000 to 2015, compared to 1.4 million from 2016 to 2024. So Justin Trudeau almost grew it by 3x. And let's just look at that breakdown. There's a graph showing the types of people that are coming. And so, folks, the bottom blue line there is the number of permanent residents that come to Canada. So people who deliberately want to come, move their families to Canada, settle here, become Canadian, essentially, be on a pathway towards Canadian citizen. I think that generally speaking, those are the kinds of people that we want, people who want to come to Canada and be part of our future and be part of the Canadian community. And then the second color on top of that, the pink, are temporary or non-permanent immigration. Look, I would argue that is even under the Harper government, if we can just leave that graph back on, even under the Harper government, that number was still too high, right? 51% of the people coming to the country are just here for a few years and then they leave, or they're here as seasonal workers and they leave, or they're here for student visas. I mean, yeah, you could argue that you should probably have 5 or 10% student visas. People can come and study at our institutions if they're world-class physicists or mathematicians, or if they, again, want an opportunity to come to Canada. But I would even argue that 50% number is too high. And you can see that it was going up. And then you can see the white line halfway through. That's 2015. And look at what has happened under the Liberal government. The absolute proliferation of temporary workers, up to 76% of the newcomers. You can see that number's gone all the way up to 2.1 million people per year coming into this country. Wyatt, I mean, I like, to me, if you're gonna let people in, like, let them in, right? Let them be part of the community, let them integrate, welcome to Canada, become a Canadian citizen, come all in, learn English or French depending on where you're living, but become Canadian. But when you have this huge, giant class of people that are kind of in limbo, that don't really have a stake in the future, that don't really have any incentive to become Canadian, I mean, this is the problem in my books, and this is what Pierre Poilievre needs to focus on, saying we need to stop this. What do you think?
And the justification for this level of immigration is based off of a few lies. With the temporary foreign worker program, it's the idea that Canadians don't want to work these jobs that these workers are filling. Well, no business would hire these TFW immigrants in order to fill these jobs either, because they're subsidized workers. If
Yeah.
the subsidy was not there, they would probably not be hiring them, which means that businesses are obviously not going to hire a Canadian because the Canadian doesn't get 350 an hour like taken off of their wages in terms of like what the government's going to comp the business who's paying them. And when it comes to permanent residences and other immigrants, you have people say, well, we need immigration to be at this level because the birth rate isn't very high, and so we need to make sure that we maintain our population so we can pay for our social programs. But you'll have studies come out of the UK showing that if you actually do pursue a policy of mass immigration, you actually push your birth rate down even further, because it turns out people don't really want to build a stable family in a country that doesn't feel stable. And so naturally, everything just keeps getting worse and worse. And so the justification ends up spurring on a new justification. And so you just keep going in circles with bringing in more people that causes your actual natural growth to slip further and further, which means that you need to bring in more people. And by the way, the people you're bringing in are also going to suffer from that same problem, because everything's unaffordable. It's not a very stable community to live in when you often have foreign ethnic conflicts happening in your city streets. You're not exactly going to want to set up shop there for your family.
Well, no, you have to be fundamentally optimistic for the future to choose to have a family and to have children. And you're right that when people don't, I mean, if people don't feel safe in their community, or frankly, if they don't recognize the community that they live in, like I talk to so many people that say, I don't feel like I'm living in Canada anymore. This isn't the Canada that I grew up in. It's not like you're going to run out and say, okay, let's go have a bunch of kids, right? Because you've lost faith in your own country. I want to go back to something you said a little earlier on, though, Wyatt, which is that they tell us that the reason that we need all of these temporary foreign workers is because Canadians are just not willing to do these jobs. It reminded me of a post I saw on social media posted by Dean Tester, who's a conservative. He put this on X. He said, student unemployment in Ottawa is sitting around 20%, with endless stories of young people handing out hundreds of resumes and getting nowhere. And yet, there are hundreds of LMIA, which is labor market opinions, requests for food service admin assistants and landscapers. So you can see the map there, folks. Those are all of the people who put in applications. This is Greater Ottawa, saying that there are no. So if you want to let in, if you're a business and you want to have temporary foreign workers come at your business, you have to put out one of these labor market opinions. So you have to put out job applications, help wanted signs, and prove that there's no one in your area that are willing to do these jobs. This has become a scam. This has become a total workaround where they just put one of these things out. It's totally fake. It's not even what it says it's supposed to be. They say, nope, no one wants a job. And so then they can turn around and hire a bunch of labor from the third world, pay them much less, have them work longer hours. And again, Dean is pointing out that there is around 20% student unemployment. So how can you simultaneously tell me that there's hundreds or thousands of young people out there in just this one city looking for jobs, and then at the same time, oh, no one to fill the job, so we have to bring in immigrants to work at the local Tim Hortons? I mean, it's just the system is just full of abuse. That's the major problem as
It
well.
also turns into effectively indentured servitude because when you're in this country, you have to work the job that you came in for. And when you're living and you cannot afford to lose this job, so you really can't say no to working potentially unpaid overtime, which we get a lot of stories of. And then these same people who are already working long hours at their one job have to then also, drive for Uber in order to pay for a half a basement suite that they live in with three or four other people. Anyone who pretends like they're opposing Pierre Poilievre because they're ethical human beings are lying to themselves, because they're supporting a system that is actually abusive, pretending as if they're like standing up for lowly immigrants. They're not. They're standing up for effectively modern day slaves who were lied into taking jobs overseas that are not actually going to do much more than just pay for them to even sustain themselves in Canada.
Well, that's 100%. I wanted to just point to this Globe and Mail article from last summer, August 24. Employers still turning to low wage workers, even as unemployment rates rise. This is kind of telling the same story, but there's this interesting graph, and it shows here positions approved in temporary foreign worker program by stream. And so it used to be, Wyatt, that the overwhelming majority of temporary foreign workers that came to Canada worked in fields. They were ag workers. They came in the summer, they picked blueberries or whatever they did, then they left. Look, I would still argue that you can hire teenagers and college students to do that kind of work, but still, these companies say, look, we need these temporary foreign workers. And yet, if we can show that graph on the screen, it shows just the rise of low wage workers during this period. So from 2022, you can see that it jumps significantly. So low wage workers used to be 20% of the temporary foreign worker program, and it has jumped up to 80%, almost as much as these ag workers. So the type of workers has totally changed. Now, this is an interesting point because we heard Mark Carney on the campaign trail and even before basically saying that the liberal immigration system was broken, that they broke it. Here's a story from CBC News all the way back in November. Mark Carney says that Canada is letting down the immigrants that it welcomed. And he basically just said, look, this isn't working, right? And we heard that again and again. And yet, when he became prime minister, he made absolutely no changes. And so here is a news story. Juno News, May 30th, 2025, Canada took in 817,000 new immigrants in the first 4 months of 2025. Look at the headline. Unbelievable. Between January and April, 132,000 people were granted permanent residency, while 194,000 were given student visas, and 490 were given these work permits. So there's no slowing down, right? And again, you can see that tilt, right? 130 were given permanent residency, and all of the rest, all the way up to 817,000. So that's what, 690,000 people were let in temporarily. Like, they're not stopping.
What drives me up the wall about that stat too is people will make excuses by saying, well, in that 817,000 number, you have visa renewals, you have student visa and TFW visa renewals. Well, that's effectively a new immigrant because the whole idea was that they were going to be here for a few years, then they were going to go home. If they're now here for rather than 3 years, 6 years, well, then that's basically a second person entering right after they leave and filling that gap. So people are trying to make excuses and pretend like Carney's doing a better job than Trudeau on immigration right now. Is he going to be better than maybe Trudeau, like 2024, 2023 Trudeau? Sure, but it's hard. It would probably have been hard for Trudeau to even top himself in the year 2025. We're going down to even what would be high levels in 2018 and 2019. And again, like you had been pointing out, it was even a little too high under Martin and Harper. It should have probably been even lower back then because, again, your immigration should always be purely supplemental to your natural growth as a country. If people's standard of living is slipping at all by bringing in more people, then you can't do it. And what we've seen over the last, I think, 9 quarters at this point is that we have per capita incomes falling in Canada because we're not actually adding more productivity with these new immigrants. We're just basically subsidizing large corporations by giving them cheaper labor. And again, it really demonstrates just the kind of loser mentality that's baked into Canada. These corporations don't push for lowering their extremely high corporate taxes. They just want to maybe try and save a few dollars by bringing in cheaper labor. It's such a people just resign to the idea that we're just always going to have big government.
Well, that's exactly right. Because my mind is, if we're having to import people who don't share our cultural values, who many of them resort to crime or at least being here illegally, like people don't leave when they're supposed to, like, why don't we just work harder to train and motivate the younger generation to do these jobs, right? Put it back in the culture that you get a summer job when you're a teenager. Or, hey, how about like getting rid of a whole bunch of social welfare programs that allow healthy, able bodied young men and women to stay at home and not work? Like, we have it all backwards. And to your point about how, many people think that Mark Carney is just automatically better than Justin Trudeau because he's not such a clown. The problem, Wyatt, is that he's surrounding himself with clownish people. And so let me just point to this news story out of Global News, an absolute bombshell. Before joining cabinet, the Public Safety Minister of Canada wrote immigration support letters for terror group members. Terror group members. So yes, our public safety minister, Gary Anasangari, wrote letters urging Canadian officials to approve the immigration applications of a man who had been determined by the government to be a member of the terrorist organization. The letter dated 2023 and another one from 2016 were written on Anasangari's House of Commons letterhead and sent to Canadian Border Services on behalf of an alleged member of Sri Lanka's Tamil Tigers who wanted to move to Canada. So the person who we charge with protecting us, public safety minister, is in charge of the border, in charge of making sure that terrorists don't come into our country, has actually advocated on behalf of terrorists coming into our country. Like, it's like the farce in Canada just never ends. The living satire that we are in. Yes, a cabinet minister is the one who wanted terrorists into our country. It's unbelievable.
And that specific issue is linked to high immigration. He is obviously trying to pander to a community where defending a member of the Tamil Tigers may get you some more votes. That's exactly what he's doing. There's a reason why we just had a shooting in Surrey where somebody who is openly part of the banned terrorist organization Barba Khalsa celebrated and took credit for a shooting on a cafe that the owner of had basically made a joke about him or his friends. And politicians are just talking about it like it's a normal gang shooting, even though there's a guy who openly took credit for it from a banned terrorist organization. We don't want to mention who it was because it might tick off certain people.
I mean, you're right. It's vote bank politics. It's like they want to get votes from these communities. And so they're willing to do despicable things. They don't put Canadians first, they put themselves and their party and their communities first. And so let me just read a little bit more from this this Global News story. Although Canadian immigration officials had repeatedly rejected this individual as an immigrant due to what they describe as protracted involvement in the Tigers, the Tamil Tigers, which is a terrorist group in Sri Lanka. Anagassery asked them to reverse their decision. In his most recent letter to CBSA, Anagassery said the agency's refusal to grant this individual permanent residency has separated the 48-year-old Sri Lankan from his Canadian wife and child, which the Toronto MP called cruel and inhumane. Okay, just to give you a bit more background about that, the child was conceived in Sri Lanka. The woman had gone to Sri Lanka and then she moved to Canada so that she could have a Canadian child, and now she wants her terrorist husband to come with her. The answer is sorry, no, go home. Instead, it's the other way around, and it's cruel and humane not to let the terrorists into the country. Here's what he said. I respectfully ask that you review and reconsider the decision. And Gassery wrote on July 19th, 2023. We're not talking about ancient history here. We're talking about 2 years ago when it was the last few days of his time as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Justice, Attorney General. Where do they find these people and why are they in charge? It is just so unbelievable. Why? What do you think?
That also just reflects a lot of liberal criminal justice policy these days. Like, don't make the person suffer the consequences of their own actions. It's cruel and inhumane that they actually, maybe take some punishment for the things that they do, for the associations they have. But yeah, like the thing is that this is rarely picked up by the mainstream media. If it's covered for a few seconds. This should be a major scandal. Again, and this has actually happened multiple times. We even have politicians supposedly on the right, like Patrick Brown, who, when he ran for the leadership in 2022 for the federal party, actually had mentioned that he may take the Tamil Tigers off the terrorism watch list, just remove them from the blacklist. This is just, and again, you're right about Mark Carney. He is more professional than Justin Trudeau, but I'm not sure if that's exactly a good thing, because I don't exactly want a more efficient leader of the current circus that is the Liberal cabinet, because they're just going to do bad things faster.
Yeah, more stealth, and they'll do it behind your back. And isn't this just like an open message to all the terrorists around the world? Like, all you have to do is just like get your girlfriend pregnant, put her on a plane, send her to Canada, have the baby in Canada, and the minister will be writing letters on your behalf, pleading to the government to let you into the country because it's inhumane to have your child separated from you. Like, this is just an absolute ridiculous. This in a nutshell is everything wrong with liberal government and our immigration system. Well, Wyatt, thank you so much for joining the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I'm really looking forward to your show on Juno News.
Yeah, thank you, Candice.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. We'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you, and God bless.